Viewers.
There you go.
Hi, viewers. We'd like to thank you today for visiting us at Knowing God First. We have a guest in the studio with us here today, and his name is Dr. David Lehman. Hello, David. How are you today?
Hi, Mary.
How you doing?
Doing fine.
Good. How was your drive getting here? Everything fine?
I managed to escape most of the officers that were chasing me.
Great. Well, as always, our first question here today is knowing God. That's the first thing that we want to always find out about, so we would like to ask you how you came to know God.
Well, I had a real rough life, and finally when I was 7 years old, I was given the opportunity to go to church, and I had gone to church for about a year. My parents didn't take me to church. I just wandered off on my own. And I learned in church that or in Sunday school, that I should go to church. So I started going to church. And in church, I learned that I should pray every night. So I prayed every night. I was not a Christian, but I still prayed every night.
Anyway, today we're going to talk to David, and I'd like you to give us a little bit about your background, your professional background, your what your doctorate degree is in, and why you are qualified here to come speak to us today, to speak to our viewing audience that did not come off very well, but go ahead.
Well, I went through University of Minnesota, and graduated in mechanical engineering. Then I took a job with McDonnell Douglas designing fighter planes in St. Louis. And while I was there, I entered the graduate school in mechanical engineering. But at the same time, I felt led to go to a Bible Institute. I met a fellow there at McDonnell Douglas who seemed to know the answers for any question that I could ask. And he could quote long sections of Isaiah and various places in the Old Testament. It precisely answered my questions. So he suggested I go to a little Bible Institute there, Brooks Bible Institute.
Okay.
And so I did. I began attending there, and from there I went to Northwestern Bible College, Covenant Seminary, Bethel Seminary, 4 years at Grace Seminary, got a Master of Divinity, then went back for a Master's in Biblical Counseling, then earned a doctorate at Oxford Graduate School in Society and Religion, then back again to Louisiana Baptist University, had a PhD in Biblical Studies. But all the time I was at Purdue University, I did studies on cults and world religions. And so we gave a talk once a week for 20 years while I was there on a different cult or a different world religion.
Wow.
And who would show up at those meetings were the people who happened to belong to that group, because they wanted to know what we were going to say about them. And so they kept us on our toes. If we got something a little bit off, they wanted to make sure that we at least were being fair to them, which I think was good. I'm glad that they did come.
So if you were talking about Wiccans, then somebody might come up to you afterward who was from
We
a
did
Wiccan
that
society.
every Halloween. We had one we tried to hit it as close as possible to the actual Sabbat of the Wiccans.
Okay.
And they would show up in numbers. And one of the reasons they showed up is because we always put it as witchcraft and Satanism. And they wanted to make sure that we didn't confuse them with the Satanists.
Because they are different.
That definitely, they would not harm any living creature, whereas the Satanists offer up sacrifices.
Interesting.
Animal sacrifices, and then sometimes human sacrifices.
And do you, in my book that I wrote, I made mention to Albert Einstein, who he obviously knew of the creator of creation, but he didn't know him on a personal level. How can our viewing audience know that God is who he says he is, that he is real, and that he is personal? Because a lot of people, maybe they might look around and acknowledge that there is design, so there is a designer, but they feel insignificant, or they feel unworthy, that there is not a chance of knowing God or bringing God down to a level of being personal, to interact with him just like we're interacting here today. How would you answer to that?
Well, Albert Einstein came from a Jewish background, but he had rejected most of that heritage. He believed that God was an impersonal force. he believed that there had to be some creator, something that would cause things to appear out of nothing. But he didn't assign that as that force a personhood. And yet the Bible is very clear about who God is. And a lot of people would ask, well, how do I know that the Bible is true? Well, the Bible has given us enough evidence that would support itself that there should be no doubt. First of all, I use the word inspiration. Inspiration comes from a Greek word, theopneustos. Literally means God breathed or God directed. It's like a master musician playing a piano. Each one of the keys on the piano has a different sound, just like each one of the apostles and prophets had a different personality, but God superintended the finished product so that it was without error. Here you have a book written by 40 different authors over a period of 1,500 years in 3 different languages. Only God could orchestrate such a book. All other cults and world religions were founded by one man, except for maybe Hinduism, which was sort of evolved over a series of several hundred years, over about 1,000 years, and was nothing more than hymns to the supernal nature spirits. Poems and hymns in the Vedas, and then later were categorized or compiled into the Upanishads, and then later epics written like the Bhagavad Gita, emphasizing some of the teachings of the Upanishads. But it's really more of a philosophy than a religion, because the God of Hinduism is an impersonal force. So what I'm saying is basically there's only 2 possible worldviews, either a theistic explanation for things or a non-theistic. Either God did it or he didn't. Either it happened naturally or supernaturally. So if you disprove one, you prove the other. And Hinduism, along with all the Eastern religions, does not see a personal God. So it's a subtle form of atheism. If God is everything, then he's nothing in particular. So they're worshiping a force.
So what you're saying is that when it comes down to it, and God created man, that as the scripture tells us, that he literally breathed the breath of life into man.
Well, that's the concept of inspiration, yes. The idea that God is speaking through man, but how do we know that it's God speaking? And God gave a challenge to all the religious writings of the world. In Isaiah 43:10, 44, 45, 46, it says, I, the Lord, am one God, there's none else beside me, before me, or that shall come after me. Who's able to tell the end from the beginning? If God's in charge, he's going to be able to tell the future. Nobody else can do that. And so, and then not only does he tell the future, 28.5% of the Old Testament and 21.5% of the New Testament is prophetic. No other book is written with prophecy that can be documented and checked out, and that's what we see in the Bible.
And isn't that what makes God God? That he was able to tell the future before it happened. That's what sets him apart from all other world religious leaders.
Well, by nature, if God is a creator and he created the space-time mass continuum, then by definition he'd have to be outside that space-time mass continuum.
Exactly.
And so as we study the creation itself, we realize that space and time are somewhat related. We see this in quantum physics, that we call it space-time. And so that will help explain how we can see stars so many light years away, how we can see supernovas and various other things that would appear here with a fairly young universe within the last 7,000 years.
Very possible for us to know God through personal experience at a very personal level.
Well, you know, if God went to the trouble to create us, obviously he's going to want us to know what he requires of us. And we find what he requires of us in the Bible itself. And it's just like he wants us to know him personally. And he's given us an invitation in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. In Acts 4:12 it says that, or Mark 4:12, it says, having eyes they see not, ears they hear not, lest they understand with their heart and be converted. And so understanding seems to be one of the necessary things for conversion.
And a heart involvement, a heart that's open to the word of the Spirit or the testimony of the word.
Well, there is a judgment upon certain people who reject the knowledge of God. They look around, they see the universe itself, and it should tell them to seek God. He
Mhm.
that seeks me with his whole heart will find me. Whosoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. But as the wicked, they turn away from the light that God gives.
Mhm.
The judgment upon them is to walk in darkness and not know over what they stumble.
Mhm.
The righteous who call upon the Lord are given more light.
Mhm.
As the light of dawn, it gets brighter and brighter into the fullness of day. So if you respond to the light that God gives you, God will give you more light. If you
Mhm.
seek him, you're going to find him.
Mhm.
If you call on him, he will answer.
Very well put. Very well put. And viewers, that's going to end our interview today. And like David said, those who seek God will find him. And we here at Knowing God First want to encourage you to seek God and find him.